Hey guys, today we're talking about archetype for Charlotte, our expert and Hey guys, today we're talking about archetypes, and I'm waiting for Charlotte, our expert and psychologist and yoga teacher and my friend, to explore the topic. And this is not gonna be stuff. We just want to explore the topics ourselves and let you discuss it with us and let you share your opinions. I will speak in English, so my Russian speaking audience, if you want to practice English or if you are fluent, please free to join and ask questions. You can ask questions in both languages, and we'll see how it goes. So the topic is really popular, and I think when Charlotte joins, I will ask her to share her opinion why this topic is so popular. I made some poll in stories asking who knows about the topic, and apparently many people do not know, but I feel that there's so many different online courses and Instagram marathons covering the topic of archetypes, because people like typologies and people like to define themselves by placing themselves in a special group or an archetype or any psychological type, basically. So it would be easier to find their place in the world. But what we wanted to wanted you to know with Charlotte, and we were discussing it today, that honestly, you cannot put yourself in a special type, because a human being is much more complicated model or any type, but still you can find some patterns in your mindset and how you behave. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Daria.
I just started sharing that today we're not gonna do like a serious psychological talk. We want to explore the topic ourselves, and we want you to join and everyone ask questions. So we will together try to explore ourselves better. That's the main goal of this life, not to give you some prescription or diagnosis, of course, but to look deeper inside yourself, to become aware of what rules my behavior, what rules what I think, what I choose, what I want to do, and maybe you will become more self-aware and make a more like free choices rather than being influenced by these patterns such as archetypes.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, when you first suggested that we talk about this, and I started looking into it a little bit, I just realized as well, like, how fascinating it is if we start to look just, first of all, obviously at ourselves, but then also at like the stories, because in a certain way we can relate this to fairy tales, right? But the stories that we also make about the people around us. And so, which was kind of also why I had this idea of why don't just put like, are we living in a fairy tale, you know? Because in a certain way, what was created first, the fairy tale or the life I'm living, or am I, creating my life according to a fairy tale?
Oh yeah, that's a chicken egg question.
Yeah, exactly.
So Charlotte, before we start exploring the topic, Can you share your opinion? Why is this topic so popular? Because I know that many people, especially those who are a little bit close to psychology or are interested in psychology, they are into archetypes. So why do you think this is such a popular topic?
I think that's a great question. You know, I think several things. Number one, I think that anyone who is interested anyway in psychology or, you know, self-development, self-awareness and relationships and all of that, which is a big part of the population, are really people who are trying to make sense, right? What we're really kind of what drives us, isn't it? It's try to understand something. And so try to make sense into who we are, why we are in the situation that we are in. And I think that there's two things. There's the wish to explain for ourselves and see this connection, which is actually quite strange in itself, of similar patterns of behaviors, because we could also imagine that depending on where you are in the world, you would have ideas that are completely different to somewhere else, but actually we can see patterns of behaviors. So I think that's one of the reasons. And then another one, which is a little bit the one that I find kind of dangerous in a certain way, which was what I was also evoking with you, is this wish to try to label ourselves so much, right? So we are so used to the very often the feminine magazines, right, where you take a quiz and it tells you what kind of person you are. And so what this means is that we're desperate to try to define who we are. And so there's also that wish with this idea of the archetypes. Everyone is kind of trying to be like, oh, where do I fit in order to just feel that who am I?
Exactly, and that's why people love so much all the typologies, all the models, especially the easiest ones, like men are, like women are from Venus, and yeah, this type of typologies and models, they are too easy, like, and no human can fit in any model, but people love to fit themselves to label, as you said, because it makes their life easier, right? Just let's say I'm a extrovert or introvert, and okay, and I will stick to that and explain to me my behavior. And we wanted you not to make the same mistake, and our life today is not a purpose to label you and to put you in any, like, on a shelf or in any block. Yeah, we want you just to ask some questions to yourself, and Charlotte will suggest you these questions like in the end of this live, but they are not to label yourself, but just to look deeper. And maybe you will not have an answer straight away, but try to keep it in mind, and maybe your life will show you the answers like in a couple of days. But start this process, and we want to give you this like impulse today, and you will see later.
Exactly. And you know, just what you said there, it comes back to the chicken and the egg again, because when it comes to these ideas of labeling and then saying, oh, this corresponds to who I am, then at one point we also start to act that way. So it's almost as if, am I acting that way because I found something that defines me, or does that resonate with me? And so I start to act according to what the description of that label is. And either way, it's the chicken and the egg. But I think what's what's unfortunate with it is that it limits us, right? And then we reduce ourselves.
True. So let's try not to limit ourselves. That's the main message, but try to use this as your resource, and maybe it will help you to overcome your limits. Yeah, let's hope that this will be our intention for today's live.
Yes.
So internet connection is okay. Do you hear me now?
I hear you. I know that sometimes where I live, it's not working. So if it happens, I might just switch on to data, but let's see how it goes. I don't know about you. Does it work usually well for you?
Yeah, normally it's okay. Yeah.
So it's probably my
But
fault.
now it's okay. Yeah, now it's okay. So, okay, my first question to you would be very obvious. What is archetype?
Okay. So, archetype. What we have to understand is that we are not born with a blank sheet, actually. Okay. So they have noticed, let's say, over the years, how there are tendencies in the way that we become that are similar to people in different parts of the world, but then also at different parts of time. Okay. The same way that when we look into history, we will see, for instance, from a very long time ago, when humankind began to actually narrate to each other, when we have traces of humankind, that there was this one thing that was very common, and that would be sitting down around a fire, for instance, and tell stories. Okay, so the storytelling in itself is something that has always existed. And we notice then in these stories that the same kind of personalities actually appear, okay, in different parts of the world and in different times. The same with, of course, what became later on, let's say, religions or beliefs. Also, we would find structures that were very similar in different parts of the world and also in different times. So what this would mean, they said, was that maybe there was on an unconscious level something that we actually all shared. And so the psychoanalyst Carl Jung was the one who kind of founded the concept of archetype, because he was actually talking about the collective unconscious. So that would be this idea that we all actually share, but on an unconscious level, not consciously, concepts with each other. And which is how we find that there are common traits in different parts of the world. Now, one thing, before I go more into what an archetype is, there's just one thing that I find incredible that really proves this, and that has been then scientifically proven. So it has been proven that, you know, crosswords, right? We all know what crosswords are. Now, crosswords that are brand new, just been created, takes longer time to solve by people than crosswords that have existed for a long time. And even more, the longer a crossword has existed, the faster someone resolves it when they do it for the first time. Okay? Wow. So this means that the more there have been people before me solving a crossword, the quicker I will solve it. So it's almost
like a genetic memory. What's this?
Well, yeah, as if I would be able, with my, you know, I would be able to catch on to some kind of information somewhere unconsciously, because I'm not aware of what I'm doing. So in itself, this is really interesting, right? And so that would come as a way to prove what Carl Jung then was saying. So basically these archetypes, so he has spoken on different occasions about a different number. Now, we will speak, of course, today about what you have put out in the stories, the typical 12 ones, okay? So that means that are these personalities, let's say, or these structures that we personate into a being, almost, I would say, that corresponds to some kind of symbol that we all have deeply down stored, okay? Now, what's interesting here is that the symbol in itself we are not aware of, but the image that we project this symbol of, we are very aware of. And so it can present itself in different, let's say, ways, but we will find common traits to it. So obviously we have like the mother, you know, the mother of all and the father of all. And so we can look into that, like the caretaker, for instance, then, or even like the hero. And we can look into, especially if we look into mythology, we can find all of these, especially these 12 ones, we find all of them. And we find them in the Greek mythology, we find them in the Romans, of course, but then we find them in completely different parts of the world, in Africa or Asia as well, or in Latin America and in the Native American also stories. I know as well the magician, you know, of course, and, you know, the old wise man. I know for myself in my Scandinavian culture that has a deep strong culture of fairy tales, and I think in Russia probably as well, of storytelling, right? And there was, like, you know, the old wise person, and then the orphan, for instance, which is somehow maybe related a bit to the hero as well, because if we look at the hero, then the hero in itself has a journey. Now, if we then look into modern days, and we start to look into, for instance, Hollywood, or all the movies, we find them, and the thing is, because we recognize them so well, we relate to them as well. So the archetypes are these deeply down stored symbols that exist within the human psyche, in a part of the psyche that is unconscious. We're not aware of it. The symbols we're aware of, but not the archetype itself, and that we share. So it's collective.
Mm-hmm. So every person in the world, everyone who is watching this live, has these archetypes inside themselves, the symbols.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Not depending on nationality or age, so everyone has it, but they're different. There are more strong archetypes, like the person shows, and the ones which are in shadow, right? So this differs from person to person.
Exactly. And this is where it becomes very interesting, because depending on different things, different parts of the world, and also the values maybe that we put on things, right? What we find is virtuous and what we find is not good. We will allow for certain archetypes to be very present within us, and we will even then identify more with certain than others. And the thing is, what's interesting is that there are then other parts of us that we have pushed away, that we still have within us, but that have left the space, basically, for the archetypes that we have valued more than the other ones.
Mm-hmm. And this depends on your family, on what are the conditions which bring certain archetypes into the light, and which bring the others into the shadow. What's the mechanism?
Well, I would say that this is just my own point of view. I would say that it's linked to basically the structure that we were given in as we come into this life, of what seems right and what seems wrong, but then also, as for instance, what is supposed to be certain roles that we have. So let's just take for a very typical example. When a girl is born, very early on in many parts of the world, I think since a very long time, she will most probably be taught that the archetype of the caregiver, for instance, is something that she should nourish, right? And it's also probably the reason that it's become such an ingrained thing to give little girls dolls in the shapes of babies to play with, so that they learn very early on to take on this. And it's the same if we look at little boys. They will be probably very early on taught that the discoverer, for instance, and the explorer is something that they should value. It's a role that is, you know, it's the hero as well in a certain way, but more the explorer maybe in the beginning, because what they're being taught then is that they should go out and explore. And I would even say that it goes as far as this is the reason that boys are then told not to cry, almost, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that it will depend on the social structure that you are in. That will, but then there are some of them that will always, because they're so ingrained in us of what the female is, of what the male is, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charlotte, I was thinking that maybe some people who would watch this live, they haven't seen the stories and haven't seen these 12 archetypes. So maybe you could just name them with a little description so that people now listening could also relate somehow to what you will be telling, and maybe think of what traits of character you are showing and which one you don't like, maybe about yourself. So and then we will continue from this part.
Okay, great. Well, you know what? I'm just going to base myself on that super good image that you put out that I've got here just in front of me. So we have, for instance, then the innocent, and that has as a goal, I think that is really good, like schematic thing that you've made there.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. There is a question. Are they the same for men and women, I guess? Yeah, they're the same both for any type of human being.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that I understand where the question is coming from, because it means then, oh, does this mean that I as a woman could relate to the explorer as well? And of course you can. But the thing is, the reason that you might not identify with the explorer would be, if the way I see it, depending on actually what was promoted in the time where you were born and where in the world that you were born. And we see this because we see as well the trends, really. Like there's these times, right? There was a period where you would find all the movies that were, on the box office and that everyone went to see at the cinemas were all about, I don't know, like when Lord of the Rings came out, for instance. Then all of a sudden it was all this fantasy theme, right? And then there was another time, and quite recently, I think there's been quite a lot of with like female heroes, for instance. So all of these archetypes will be the same for us, and they can take a female or a male shape, if you will, and there will be tendencies depending on actually what we learned we should identify with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'll just go back to that one then. So the first one that we've got here is, for instance, the innocent, and that has as a goal to be happy, and the flaws that I have, like, oh, I'm too trusting. That's quite interesting. And their skill would be to be open-minded. Okay, so think about that one. Then we have the orphan, and the orphan, of course, its goal, what is it in life? It is, of course, to belong, and its flaw would be actually to be very cynical. Now we're starting already here to see, like, I recognize as well, even in things that we've seen in series that we watch, like there's this, you know how there's always this, like, let's say there's any of the shows that you're watching or watched when you were younger, there was always like a group, right, of 6 or 7 people. And then we would have the typical ones, and we recognize them as I say this, and then we identify more with one of them, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. So then the orphan, to belong, and its flaw is to be cynical, and its skill is that it's a realist, of course, because what is cynical if not being a very, very realistic, right? The hero is also wants to belong, but its flaw is that it's a fighter, right? It's a warrior in a certain way, so it needs to fight to get what the goal, if you will, and its skill is courage.
Sorry to interrupt. You said this innocent, or who wants to belong? The hero and the orphan.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but they have different strategies how to gain this, right? Like the hero fights, and the orphan just he wants others to feel pity for him, or
Well, yeah, well, I mean, just for yourself, when you say the words, just, I'm sure that you, just like me, then you get an image almost in your head of what an orphan is or what a hero is, right? And so you can imagine that the orphan feels actually pretty helpless,
Yeah.
whereas the hero is, well, what is a hero if not powerful in a certain way, right? He goes his own way. So there's this difference. I would even say that the hero has almost, his goal of belonging is almost to like a higher purpose, whereas the orphan, the need to belong, is something really archaic, really like lower chakras almost, if you see what I mean. It's the you know, it's the mother. He's seeking his mother. He's seeking, of course, the caregiver, who we are just about to talk about.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so the caregiver, which is very often then represented by the ultimate mother. It's Mother Earth. It's Gaia in itself. You know, if that is not, you know, to care, give, right, to nurture. So the goal is, of course, then to help others. It's the ultimate mother. It's the Holy
And also
Mary.
to save others.
Well, yeah. It's, of course, it is to save. It's yes, absolutely. It's because
I know many people who are always trying to save you, and sometimes you don't need saving, but they still want to save you.
well, yeah, I would say that to help others and to save others is a little bit, in a certain way, the same thing. Probably for the caregiver themselves, the illusion or the idea is that they want to help, and depending on that's an interesting one. I would say, I mean, and it's interesting because on the image that you have posted, it's represented by a nun, right? By a Christian nun. It's got the cross there and everything. So yeah, it's definitely a way to try to save someone, right? And of course, the caregiver has as a flaw to be a martyr. Okay. So the thing is, in a certain way, ultimately, the caregiver can never really be satisfied. And I even feel like it can even be like it's like the ultimate mother, right? She's you know, she's exhausted, but because she's there for her family, and so she's exhausted. She's the martyr. She cannot see herself as content in a certain way as well. So it's very unfortunate as a role. And of course, the skill of the caregiver is then compassion.
But this could be like I don't know, a balanced compassion when you know where not to go, like when not to cross the boundaries of the other person, or help when it's really needed. But this could be also like this saving mode when you're, I don't know, suffering yourself and like giving everything to others, but then you feel also angry of others because they're not being grateful, or because they are not giving you attention back, or something like that. So this could be like a balanced version, or a like negative or minus, with a minus, compassion with a minus. So I mean, is there a balance, or in this, like in a balanced amount of this archetype you could have, or like it depends maybe on which other archetypes are there in you and how you like choose between them? Do you understand my question?
I understand absolutely your question. And, you know, I think it's a question of, that's on a global way. So any of the archetypes are everything at the same time, right? They're balanced and they're extreme at the same time. It is actually the person in itself that, depending on your own balance, so I would say that will either be in the extreme or not. So what I would say, for instance, is that it is a question of intention that lies behind it. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that I'm really identifying with the caregiver, and my intention that lies behind it really truthfully is just a question of helping others, and that I am balanced in my life in general, then of course I will not exhaust my resources. I will not cross boundaries. But that is because I have a balanced state of being. And if I'm impersonating the caregiver in the sense that this is my reason for existence, then naturally I will go into its extreme. But we are talking more on, okay, so if I say it like this, someone who's perfectly sane and someone who is completely psychotic will still have all the archetypes. So naturally you can imagine that they will impersonate the different archetypes in different ways because of their own mental balance. Then there's one thing, and I think this is really essential. This is one of the things that I find the most interesting with archetypes, is that anything that is unconscious will always have its power over us. So that means that the more we are ignorant, the worse we behave. Because this means that the more I don't know myself, the more I can let these archetypes take over me, okay? And the thing is, the archetype will have a good side and it will have a bad side, right? And so very often, like Jung said, that the unconscious is a constitution of the archetypes and our instincts. So if we let our unconscious take over, this is when we see things like we see in the world today, of people becoming completely psychotic and killing other people in the name of righteousness, or in the name, I mean, look at like ISIS, you know, to take something extreme. There we have definitely, or even like, without talking about today, the Crusades back in the days when the new Christians decided that they should, you know, save the world. And they killed in the name, I mean, killing in the name of God, which is done constantly, is a very typical identification to it. It's a archetype, but that works straight out of the unconscious. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So what, like to summarize, for me, I think to balance your archetype, not to let it rule you or become extreme, you need first of all to become aware, and then you will have a choice, because you could look at it from a perspective. You get this destination, like a space between you and this like pattern, and then from this perspective you could decide whether it's okay for you, or maybe it's completely like not, doesn't fit into your values or your, I don't know, your new goals which you are setting for yourself. So like the main thing is to become aware, right? And to be honest with yourself. Because sometimes people say that, yeah, I'm aware, I already like done so much work, but actually there are still lots of issues they're ignoring and do not want to look into this. And that's why I'm raising this topic of shadow, because that's the most uncomfortable things, and I want people to go into this zone out of comfort, because this is the only way. And that's why we are talking about these archetypes today with Charlotte, because it's not like a sweet typology. I will like label myself as a lover or as a caregiver, and I will think that I'm a sweet little girl. No, that's not the goal. We want on the contrary, we want you to question if there is something unconscious that is ruling your behavior and your thoughts, and maybe you will become conscious, and then you will get more freedom.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, and that's a little bit what I wanted to leave afterwards as a question, but just just to take under consideration, to look at oneself and to begin to notice maybe what ideas am I identifying with, and actually begin to question, does this belong to me? Why have I chosen to identify with this as an archetype? And even like just the idea of, well, playing out other types of archetypes, you know, and noticing just how uncomfortable, just like you were saying, just how uncomfortable that might make us feel. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be something negative. It might actually be just that we're not familiar with it. And so then, like, how can I explore that side of myself? And it's almost this like multiple personalities, you know, to be able to come. Let's say that the goal would be to come that far that you can look at yourself when you're thinking things, when you're saying things, when you're acting things, and go, oh, there's the so-and-so, you know, there's the lover, there's the rebel, there's, you know, and the thing is, it also becomes, if we can a little bit take ourselves less seriously that way, it also becomes easier, you know, to deal with things for ourselves.
True. So, like, treat it like a game. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's what helps me when I start feeling like too uncomfortable or too bad about myself. I just try to think of it like a game, because we're like a computer program, and there's nothing bad or good about it. It's just like it is.
Yeah.
So, and I want to explore how it is, and that helps me to not to become too serious about this. So
yeah.
like play with it, and you'll see what can be changed, or maybe even transformed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I interrupted you just in the middle of your explanation about the archetype. So could you please?
Sure. We'll go on to the other ones. Then, so we were talking about the caregiver, and then we have of course the explorer that we've already mentioned, and so the goal of the explorer is then, of course, to have a very fulfilling life, to have a full life. Its flaws is that it's wandering. So it's someone who is not, I mean, it's a nomad, right? So it's a little bit what's very trendy as well, at least here.
So yeah, what I was thinking is that's a new trend, like with all these movies about Facebook, Steve Jobs, etc. So it's like the hero of modern times is the explorer, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's even now, I know that you're a little bit younger than I am, but I don't know if you remember Indiana Jones. So Indiana Jones were all these movies, right? And that was like the incarnation of the explorer. And the thing about him was that, yeah, he was looking for a full life, and his skill is autonomy, because he was always on his own, and he made it on his own, of course. But the flaw that is, it's the wanderer, right? So he would always leave some poor woman crying, you know, because he had to move on.
Yeah, that's a sacrifice for a higher goal.
Exactly. So he was on his journey. So this is why, see, you can, in some way, you can also then a little bit see the hero in him, you know, but because he doesn't, so this is also probably why Jung at different times also talked about, you know, only four archetypes, and then at other times 12, and then other ones have talked about other ones. We have the rebel, of course. The rebel is also, I mean, a rebel comes in, I think, in each generation in a certain way, when we come and we want to break free from the old generation's ways and do the opposite. So the goal, of course, is to change the norms of the rebel. And its flaw is crime, because, of course, to change the norm, you need to break the rules. And its skill is wild freedom. And I mean, we just look into each time, each like 10 years in time, and we see a little bit the things that were happening. So look at, like, for instance, we had during the war, we had one thing that was, like, I'm talking about like the Second World War. We had one thing that was, you know, the rules of the time. And then the generation that came after that were the baby boomers, for instance. So these are people who were born right in the late 40s, early 50s and so. And they would then want to break free from the patterns from that time by becoming very, I mean, it was the welfare system that was planted. So it was, you know, you need to get the mortgage and get the house and 1 or 2 cars, and it was consumerism, because it was like building everything up again, because of course their parents had been poor during the war. And then what came after them, the generation that came after them, well, then they came the hippies, because of course then they were against, they wanted to break the norm of this consumerism and just, you know, slaves to the state in that way. So then the hippies came. And then what happens after the hippies is that the children of the hippies, they couldn't stand their spacey, weird parents. So then we come into the 80s, and what do we have then? Then it's, you know, just making money, and it's the high tide of a lot of drugs as well that comes in, that are linked to the professional world, like a lot of cocaine and things like that, because it was just full on one thing. And we can even see this in, you know, what was the fashions at the time in each and one of these periods, what were we watching, what were we reading, and it all goes into that stereotype, right? So the rebel has always been, and then it creates a whole universe around that. And we see it now as well, right? Of course, we see the millennials and how that is different to the generation before them. And we could go on about that, but let's not do that now, because otherwise we'll continue for the rest of the day.
Yeah. So
then we have, oh yeah, sorry, should I continue?
Yeah.
We have the lover, of course. So that is, you know, seeking relationship. And the floor is to try to please everyone. So it's the typical people pleaser, like we all know. And we all have a part of it inside of us. And the lover has, for, let's say, skill, that definitely, just like the caregiver, compassion, but more in that sense of bonding with people. So it's friendships and creating bonds that way. The creator, now that's an interesting one. I think that's the one that sometimes is called the artist, maybe as well. And the goal of the artist or the creator is obviously to realize a certain vision. You know, they're very conceptual, and I guess it could be in a certain way leaders, not to take action, but to be the person next to the leader that gives the vision. And
so
they
it's
have
so
very
popular nowadays, I guess.
Oh, very much. I mean, even there, you were talking about, you know, the Facebook creators and the Apple and all of that. There's definitely, I mean, the one who's always been put at first for these companies were the visionary, right? The creator. And unfortunately, the one who did the good job was the one who's got a little bit forgotten about.
And everyone now wants to become a creator and not to do the dirty job, you know.
Exactly. How interesting is that? And why does that appear now? Like, in what way have we put values into this instead of being the one who has the oh, what's the word that I'm looking for? The artisan, the woodworker, you know, the ones who have like
with your hands, with your hands, what you do with your hands. Yeah.
Because at one point that was the highest, right? And so how come today that is different? It's an interesting question to look at. Sorry, there's dogs out here. I hope it's not disturbing too much.
Yeah, we hear that.
Yeah. Right, and so then we have, of course, sorry.
Yeah, we continue, yeah.
The ruler, of course, is the king, and his goal is prosperity, and his skill is leadership, of course. And I mean, the ruler, the king, the tsar, the emperor, the prime minister, the president. I mean, they're fully there, right? It's quite an obvious one. It's funny is as well is that it's the God, isn't it? According to the religions that we've created, man has created for themselves, God is the ruler, which is really just a representation of the king.
Mm-hmm. What's funny, what I notice, that actually this archetype is now becoming very popular among women, like a queen. And I see so many, Instagram profiles or even online trainings teaching women to become this archetype of the queen. Maybe that's a compensation of the previous period when women didn't have a voice, and now what I see that all women want themselves to be this goddess, and true. But what's the motivation behind? Sometimes I feel that the motivation is actually to manipulate, because you are so gorgeous and, I don't know, good looking, and your vibe is so appealing. And this sounds very fascinating, but I feel that behind is a motivation actually to manipulate, to make men do what you want, to make others do what you want. And I'm not feeling this is okay. I mean, I see so much fuss about this nowadays, and it might look very charming, and every woman wants to be queen. But I would like what I'm suggesting now, to answer yourself a question: what's behind? Before you are paying money to become this goddess.
Well, if you look at it from the archetypal point of view, what is the ruler or the queen or the goddess, which is very often what they want to name themselves, right? It's not the caregiver, is it? It's the opposite to that. So yes, it comes as a reaction, I think, to this. And also it's not inclusive, because what does a queen do? A queen rules over the people, right? So there's a separation, which means that it's not a call to love in itself. And so if it's not a call to love, then naturally there should be a question behind, why is this not a call to love? And this is, in my point of view, then resonating with exactly what you're saying, because I think that this is exactly it. It is then the need to control, which means the need to manipulate. And why do we feel a need to manipulate? We only feel that if we believe that we cannot actually obtain what we want by being just who we are. So basically it comes from this position of feeling powerless, of feeling helpless, and then instead turning this around to take the control, to manipulate the situation in order to obtain what it is that you want.
That's very deep. Like, I mean, now we need to make a post that everyone now thinks about it, because it's deeply rooted in many, many people I know, and I see how they behave. They try to look like a very strong and powerful people, but if you read between the lines, you could see this powerless child who actually wants to control others because of this, what you said. And I mean, if anyone who is now watching or will be watching later could confess to themselves that they have it, this would be like a starting point for growth and healing.
Yeah, I agree. So and I think that I personally find that one of the best ways to start to tap into that side of ourselves is when we notice that we are triggered. When we notice that we are triggered, basically when we feel like this, this push of like, anger or frustration of some kind, this wanting to do something, to take action, then in that moment, if it's possible to make a pause, to notice it and to ask oneself, what am I making it mean? Okay? Because usually, if we can actually be with that, those thoughts, because it's created from thoughts, right? The ideas, those thoughts of the powerlessness will come to the surface, because it will be, I'm afraid because I don't feel like I'm controlling the situation, or I'm afraid because I feel like I'm dominated by the other. You know, there's like, if we really can sit with and asking ourselves, okay, I feel I'm triggered. Why am I being triggered? What am I making this mean? What is the thought that created the feeling of being triggered, if I'm making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would suggest to write down these questions and like to wake up, or I don't know, to have it in your notes on your phone, and actually take these pauses, this small little step, but looking at these questions, asking yourself, and this would make a huge difference, like a huge difference. A small little action.
Yeah.
Maybe we will put it into comments under the live, so that people would actually see them. Yeah, let's do this after.
Let's do
All
that.
right. So what else? Who else do we have left?
So we still have a few more to talk about. We have the magician, of course.
Also
the
popular.
magician. Sorry.
Especially also popular now, especially in Bali.
Oh yeah, because it's you know, the goal is transformation. And so I mean, yeah, we've met them. We've met them. And I feel like there as well with the magician, there's this like, it mixes up with the caregiver and the ruler, and then we have the sage and the gesture as well, of course, too, that comes into this, the two last ones there to mention. And so the magician, it says that it's skill, and that's interesting. I'd love to get your view on that. It's the skill of the magician is the win-win.
Win-win. So he, well, of course, because a fairy, any fairy tale, it's I think about this making some magic, and in order to create something that couldn't be created without magic, you know, because without magic it would be win-lose, but then we create some magic and it becomes win-win. So I just make something I don't know, unrealistic happen, and this becomes win-win. Maybe
it's a little bit the typical thing in the stories of the, for instance, the princess that has to marry the dragon, right? And then the magician comes in, usually actually in the form of a female, because it's to speak to the girl, and that tell her to do something, right? And the transformation will be that when she kisses the dragon or the frog or whatever it is, it transforms into a prince, and then there's a win-win. Yeah, okay. So the magician is a very powerful idea. And of course, the flaw that it has is that it's egotistical, which we can also see then, of course, because that's definitely then, if you would go into the, you know, into the more shadow, the magician that we have in the shadow, when it plays out, when it rules us, it's, you know, it's the ego that rules it all. And this is where, once again, it becomes so important that we become aware, so that we can see the archetype playing out. And in the world today, there's, I mean, even just like in the situation we're in with this whole COVID situation and all of that, I feel like we really have this like of the darkness and the light and the good and the bad, and it's playing out, and everyone is choosing sides, and everyone is being so unconsciously identified with the archetypes that they become extreme. And I think that's where we really, to actually come back a little bit to what you were talking about earlier, when it goes into something bad, you know, when it goes to the extreme. We will see this when people are becoming fanatic in something, you know. And so we see it in beliefs, we see it in religion, and in politics and things like that. And we see it in a fearful situation like the one we're in now. I mean, just like vaxxers, anti-vaxxers, that whole thing, and like the things that people say about each other when they don't, you know, believe in the same ideas. For me, there's a side of the magician in there, and the egotistical coming out as well.
True. Ooh, well.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, I wanted to talk about this, but then I thought it's another like 1 hour discussion. Yeah. So maybe let's finish with the archetypes. There is magician, there is sage, you think, and there is jester. Yeah.
Just like the Joker, you know.
The Joker, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the tools of these last two?
So the sage, of course, is the wisdom, and the sage is someone, you know, that's very, I find that it's someone that I've always loved very much, you know. It's the one that comes and warms your heart a little bit when you're scared and you're reading a story. And their skill, of course, is intelligence. You know, obviously we have Gandalf. You would say in a certain way was a magician, but actually no, he's really the sage. And his flaw is that he's not taking action, right? It's Yoda.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, I love Yoda. And then the jester, of course, his goal is to lighten up. It's the funny guy, right, or the funny girl. And the skill is, of course, then humor. And the flaw is wasting time. I find that interesting. Yeah. It's kind of to use humor as a way to beat around the bush, like they say, right? To not actually go straight to the point.
True. But, okay, to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Do you think there are archetypes better than others, or they are all needed, and the key to peace inside yourself is to know each archetype inside yourself, like to recognize and to make them, be friends with each other? So what should we do? What should we do with all the information?
Okay, to wrap it up, as you said. Well, I think, number one, I think that it's impossible to be able to say which archetypes are good, which archetypes are bad, because I believe that in a certain way, isn't it like the 5 elements? It's omnipresent, and it wouldn't be possible. It would be like taking a piece of puzzle out of the puzzle, and then nothing would stick together. And so I don't think that would be the goal. I think that just like everything else, when it comes to coming to peace with oneself, it is that each and one of the sides of you, each and one of your traits, that you accept and that you embrace them for what they are. And so one of the things that when I was looking into this today and thinking about it a little bit, one of the things that I wanted to leave with everyone who's watching, and almost like a questioning, is to actually look into and to take really the fairy tales. Because when it comes to the movies and all of that in the books, we get a little bit influenced as well about, I don't know, which actor we like or whatever. If we really look into the characters of the fairy tales, which are the ones that we've always preferred, right? Which are the ones that we always identified with, you know? And in that way, it is not a question of saying you are the sage or you are the hero, but it means that it's someone that you have valued, And then to look into, okay, and so how, okay, I value this. And so I have kind of impersonated this archetype in what I'm doing. And so, and that gives me then the opportunity to look at my actions and see where do they come from? So where is the intention behind what I do? Is it an intention that comes from a deep truth of this is who I am? Or is it an intention of aligning with an idea, so with an archetype that I'm identifying with, if you see what I mean? So to make it really simple, if I'm feeling very strongly that I'm identifying with the caretaker, is the idea of wanting to have children is the main goal in my life, is that because it's my truth, or is it because I'm aligning with the archetype? Or the explorer, is it really that my wish is to explore the world? Or is it because I feel like if I don't do that, then I'm missing out and then I'm nothing? So it's a little bit that, I think that's my question for you. So it's look into the fairy tales. Don't look too much into the modern stuff, because look into what you used to, because you know, this is planted. Well, I mean, obviously before birth, but it was also created very early on in life. So yeah. And then of course, none of it is to reject or to embrace more, but it's actually to make peace with, to accept.
True. And then, okay, if you become aware, if you accept, but then you realize, for example, that caregiver is not serving you anymore. Like you realize that all these intentions were not really yours. You were just following this model, this archetype. Is there a chance, like, to choose another archetype? I don't know, or to maybe not to choose any role model, but to develop some other traits of character. For example, if you lack, I don't know, if you're not brave enough, if you're like this caregiver and pleaser, and you lack self-confidence, for example, could you just start exploring into rebel, for example, or a hero, and like add these, traits of character into your personality? Is it possible, like, to rewire yourself consciously, or just like it stays with you forever?
No, of course, and that's the thing. That's the beauty of it. Since we have all of this, like we said when we just started, all of us have all of it. It's part of our unconscious and of the collective unconscious. So these are just limiting beliefs, you know, when we think that we are bound. We make ourselves very small. And actually anything is possible. And why not then choose to, okay, I want to be the rebel, you know, and then you can be the rebel and you impersonate that. And you you know, you can do as simple stuff as looking into, okay, what kind of person in the stories, in the fairy tales, in the books, that are the rebels do I resonate with? Who, like, you know, and then feel into that. And you can, I mean, we've all done it actually without realizing it, with the archetypes that we identify the most with. It's exactly what we did. We looked at them. I mean, look at pop culture. When we were children, we would have posters on the wall of whoever singer was, you know, we thought was really cool then. What was that if it wasn't impersonating that archetype? You can redo it, but more consciously.
Wow, that's the beauty of human brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Neuroplasticity.
Exactly.
Wow. So thank you, Charlotte. It was so deep and interesting for me, and I hope for everyone. Let's, I think, finish for today, and let's leave some questions that the audience could ask themselves, not only once, but like regularly. And let's and also you could I mean, everyone who's watching could send your questions, and we could explore this topic more together, because with Charlotte we're also looking forward to like diving deeper. Personally, I'm into this shadow stuff for myself, and I love to share this, not from a perspective of like an expert, but like a friend who is willing to share insights. So let's share insights. If you have them, just leave a comment.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, and I've really enjoyed this. This was so good, and we have to do this more often because I really enjoyed it. And as you said, it's like it's this exploration that we do of ourselves, actually, that we're just sharing, right? And so we're not necessarily coming from a viewpoint of a specific kind of expert in something, and I think that that's what people can appreciate as well, because then it's like being a part of a conversation. And when they want to comment, then they can just leave us a comment afterwards.
Yeah. Leave a comment or send a direct message if you are too shy. I don't know. So thank you, Charlotte. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.